Peace and welcome to an introduction to hip hop. I am the acronologist G. Simone. Every culture produces its own principles, its own history, its own advocates, and its own teachers, pointing the way to that higher quality of life. Every culture produces its own keeper, its own philosopher. For the urban street culture known in the world today as hip hop, KRS-One, an acronym for Knowledge Reigns Supreme Over Nearly Everyone, is all of these. The presentation that you are about to see is designed for the empowerment of hip-hop's actual teachers. Although anyone can learn from this presentation, it is hip-hop's authentic teachers that we are most concerned with here. And so it is my honor now to bring to you the teacher, KRS-One.
From the very beginning of hip-hop's existence in the Bronx in 1973, we have been living and methodically documenting, collecting, and accumulating the material and immaterial existence of hip-hop. We do this with the intent to pass such cultural knowledge on to those hip-hoppers who are to come after us. I am KRS-One, founder and teacher of the Temple of Hip Hop, which is a hip hop preservation ministry, archive, school, and society. Not only do we approach hip hop culturally, we also approach hip hop as a divinely inspired global culture of peace and prosperity. Our temple is exactly what it says that it is, a temple for and of hip hop. Here we approach hip hop spiritually, philosophically, and culturally. Rap is something we do, while hip-hop is something we live. And it is the living of hip-hop that reveals its spiritual, philosophical, and cultural existences. This is what we are going to learn today: hip-hop as culture and as lifestyle, not just as music or as dance. Since 1973, we have been developing our knowledge of hip-hop, how it functions and how we are to correctly express it. And only now, some 50 years later, has it become possible to reveal the first stages of what we have learned. The body of knowledge that I'm about to reveal to you is authentic, accurate, and authoritative. And these are the words that I would like to begin our study with: authenticity, accuracy, and authority. To be a real hip-hop teacher, or a teacher of any subject, one has to be authentic, accurate, and authoritative. Such hip-hop authenticity, accuracy, and authority can only come from authentic, accurate, and authoritative hip-hop teachers. I am that teacher, and it is my sacred duty, as well as my pleasure, to reveal this important cultural knowledge to you at this time. I speak today in a collective voice based upon my direct relations with hip-hop's actual founders and originators. It is they who call me Master Teacher, and it is we, all of us, that I represent in this teaching. As hip-hop's first culturally ordained master teacher, I sincerely thank all teachers of hip-hop for taking the time, the money, and the space to expose students to hip-hop in some meaningful way. I know that it has not been easy for many of us, and this is why I am offering this empowering hip-hop teachers course to you at this time. My point here is to empower you, the hip-hop teacher. As our study of hip-hop unfolds, I will be referencing a variety of dictionaries, encyclopedias, and other reference books to broaden and to clarify what I am teaching. I do not rely upon these books as the foundation of my teachings, or even as an approver or authority in regards to what I am teaching. I refer to certain well-known reference books amongst scholars because when teaching any subject, it is best to start where people already are. Plus, referencing such widely used and known study sources minimizes debate and confusion while teaching. In addition, when teaching hip-hop, it is not wise to assume that your audience understands every word that you are using or the ways in which you may be using such words. So, it is always best to refer to a common source, like a dictionary, to further clarify whatever you are implying. The teaching of hip hop is a new discipline in the world, so referencing well-known study materials will help other scholars, students, better understand hip hop in the languages and methods that they are already familiar with. Hip hop is the truth, and once you are familiar with the truth regarding hip hop, you can refer to any study materials to express such truths. So because our subject is new, it is wise to first use what is already widely known amongst scholars of all sorts to introduce ourselves and our hip-hop style of teaching. It is for these reasons that we will be referencing the Oxford English Dictionary 20-volume set, along with other Oxford English Dictionary publications like the new shorter Oxford English Dictionary and the Oxford Dictionary of New Words. We will also be referencing the American Heritage Dictionary, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th editions, along with the photography work of Jamel Shabazz, Martha Cooper, and Joe Conzo. Other books like Hip, The History by John Leland, The Hip Hoptionary by Alonzo Westbrook, and The Gospel of Hip Hop will also come up in our study from time to time. As you will learn, this introduction to hip hop is empowering to the hip hop teacher because here you are learning from an original and culturally authentic hip hop teaching source. The importance of this is that by comprehending the language of this culturally authentic hip hop study, you raise your own self-worth as an authentic teacher of hip hop's real culture. It is here that you become an authentic teaching authority yourself because you are learning from an authentic teaching authority. And this is a good time to show you what I mean by referencing certain dictionaries to minimize debate and confusion while teaching, or to clarify what I am implying. Looking at the American Heritage Dictionary, 4th edition, we see the word authentic, meaning 1, conforming to fact and therefore worthy of trust and reliance or belief, an eyewitness. 2, having a claimed and verifiable origin or authorship, which conforms to fact and is not counterfeit or copied. Again, a claimed and verifiable origin or authorship, not counterfeit or copied. As hip-hop's first master teacher, this is what KRS-One is and also has. A claimed and verifiable origin and authorship within hip-hop's real culture as hip-hop's actual teacher, which conforms to fact and is not counterfeit or copied. This is why I emphasize being the first master teacher. I am not the counterfeit version of or the copied version of a hip-hop teacher. I am hip-hop's first master teacher, delivering an original hip-hop studies course, which I myself have authored. This is where authenticity begins, and it is this authenticity and authority that is being transferred to you through the language of this hip-hop cultural study. Looking at the same American Heritage Dictionary, 4th edition, we see the word authority, with a variety of meanings pointing to power, enforcement, command, and so on. But in its academic sense, we find the word authority beginning at 4a to mean an accepted source of expert information or advice. B, a quotation or citation from such a source. 5, justification, grounds. 6, a conclusive statement or decision that may be taken as a guide or precedent. All of these definitions to authority equal who I am and what I have established within hip-hop's actual culture. These are the facts, and this is what is being transferred to you through the language of this study, authority. Others can have their opinions, their likes, their dislikes, but when it comes to the facts, this is why we refer to certain widely known reference sources to clarify what we are implying. Looking now at the New Oxford American Dictionary, 3rd edition, we see again the word authority, meaning 1, the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. The right to act in a specified way delegated from one person or organization to another. Official permission, sanction. 2. A person or organization having power or control in a particular, typically a political or administrative sphere. 3. The power to influence others, especially because of one's commanding manner or one's recognized knowledge about something. The confidence resulting from personal expertise. A person with extensive or specialized knowledge about a subject, an expert. Finally, a book or other source able to supply reliable information or evidence, typically to settle a dispute. Close to the bottom where we see origin, we see that the word authority comes from the Old French autorité, from the Latin auctoritas, from the Latin auctor, meaning both originator and promoter. Here we can plainly see that the actual etymology of the word authority begins with being an originator of something or a promoter of something, even an author. These definitions go on to define authority as the confidence resulting from personal expertise. A person with extensive or specialized knowledge about a subject, an expert. This is where one's authority to teach hip-hop begins. It begins with one's extensive or specialized knowledge regarding hip-hop. It begins with a certain confidence resulting from personal expertise. Professionally, practically, and academically, the word authority has to do with being a specialist at something. Again, it means a person with expert knowledge of a particular subject. It also means a recognized knowledge about or expertise in something. To be the authority on a subject, one must be proficient in all aspects of the subject. One must be an expert on the subject, a person with a high degree of skill and knowledge regarding the subject. If you are not an expert or specialist regarding hip-hop, or you have not been authorized by an authentic hip-hop cultural authority, you cannot expect to professionally teach any aspect of hip-hop seriously, or even be taken seriously as a hip-hop teacher. Respectfully, you are not a qualified authority on the subject, nor have you been authorized by the true authorities of the subject. You have not been appointed by the culture itself to teach it. But when the culture itself ordains you to represent it in the world, this is where the real empowerment begins. This is where one's cultural authority to teach begins. This is how you become an authority regarding the teaching of hip-hop and its real culture yourself, or rather, an accepted source of expert information or advice regarding hip-hop yourself. You have received the knowledge of your craft from the author of the craft. In this case, you are learning of hip-hop's authentic culture from hip-hop's authentic cultural architect through the lessons of this study. These are the facts, and it is the actual deeds of our culture that establish such facts. Here, facts matter, and right along with the words authenticity and authority is the word fact. Of course, most people believe a fact to be something written or a statement backed up by some kind of material evidence. But as we look at the Oxford English Dictionary, we see that a fact is a thing done or performed. It is an action, a deed, or a course of conduct. It is considered to be action in general, deeds, as opposed to words. These are facts. In a more modern sense, a fact is something presented as objectively real. It is something having a real, demonstrable existence. It is also the quality of being real and actual. The American Heritage Dictionary, 4th edition, defines a fact as knowledge or information based on real occurrences. Still, a fact is something done or information based on real occurrences. And the key word here is occurrences, what actually happened. Regardless as to what a person says, it is one's deeds that define what is actually being said or implied. Likewise, it is not solely what is written that is a fact. It is what has been done, what has occurred that is a fact. This is important to grasp at the top of our study, because where facts matter, deeds matter. Action in general matters. And this is what separates this authentic hip-hop studies course from others that simply offer a review of popular rappers and DJs as the basis of their study. This hip-hop study is quite different. This is a cultural study, not an entertainment study. Cultural studies require hard evidence, retrievable data, verifiable history, and truth. Different from an entertainment study or even history, which are most times made up and often led by purely commercial interest or self-interest, real cultural studies rest upon real and verifiable events, dates, people, and places. It also rests upon the consistent testimonies of the culture's originators. All serious scholars know this, and likewise, all serious scholars know that having a connection to the original source of a subject makes one's scholarship regarding that subject authoritative and authentic. And this is what an introduction to hip-hop offers: access to a real cultural teaching, authority, and authenticity. It is here that we begin to leave the realm of hip-hop as entertainment and enter the realm of hip-hop as culture and as fact. Deeper than simply being a student of hip-hop, objectively studying hip-hop from the outside of it, here you are studying hip-hop from its source, from its cultural source. Here, hip-hop is not simply something to know, it is also something to continue. Knowledge of hip-hop, or any culture for that matter, begins with words like heritage, tradition, and lineage. The study of these words, as they pertain to culture, can only come from the culture itself. All objective approaches to heritage, tradition, and lineage will prove themselves to be either incorrect or incomplete. Only the culture can speak accurately for itself and pass itself on to itself. It is then through this authentic hip-hop studies course that such a lineage is now being passed on to you, if you so desire to continue it. This is where your authority to teach hip-hop culturally comes from. It comes from one's own accurate adoption of the culture itself, which now includes your participation in its continuation. Of course, you will have to take our full apprenticeship at the Temple of Hip Hop to be certified and or ordained to teach the culture of hip hop officially. This introduction to hip hop is exactly what it says it is, an introduction. But this introductory tutorial will at least introduce you to the basics of our hip hop studies course and connect you to the real cultural authority necessary to teach such a course. The intent here is to empower hip-hop's actual teachers and further develop the hip-hop teaching tradition. From here, you can further develop your own teaching style and teaching methodology. But with this authentic and authoritative hip-hop study as part of your foundational understanding of hip-hop, you are not only intellectually united with the originators of the hip-hop teaching tradition, but you are also empowered by its truth. So, if you are really serious about teaching the culture, the history, the arts, and the sciences of hip-hop, open your mind and let's get started.
An Introduction to Hip Hop, Lesson 1.
Welcome back. When most people hear the term hip hop, they tend to think of rap music, specifically rappers and DJs. Some might include graffiti art and break dancing. But for those influenced mostly by corporate media, hip hop appears to them as a music genre because of the popularity of rap music. Their basic understanding of hip-hop comes from radio and television, or rather the marketing and programming of entertainment executives and their financial interests. Such approaches to hip-hop, however, are purely entertainment-based, and they lack the depth needed to fully appreciate hip-hop as the global culture that it has become. In the past, many believed that you had to be born hip-hop in order to fully understand hip-hop. That hip-hop was something that one was born expressing. And while there is some truth to this belief, especially for the first hip-hoppers of the early 1970s and 1980s, hip-hop has now existed in the world long enough for us to see its repeatable patterns. As a unique cultural identity with techniques and methods of all kinds unique to its existence, along with a real historical record of its own, unique to its cultural development, hip-hop emerges not just as a music genre, but as a useful and teachable subject, something that is important to know in modern times. This cannot be denied. In addition to being a sustainable urban lifestyle and cosmopolitan character, hip-hop has become a unique group of people in the world that are in need of useful knowledge regarding themselves, ourselves. And this is why we teach hip-hop. Before we teach hip-hop to anyone else, we must first teach it to ourselves and to our children accurately. This is where the real teaching of hip-hop begins, not with the biographies, the recording sales of artists and so on, popular rappers, but with real cultural teachers teaching real cultural knowledge based upon the existence of our real cultural heritage. Teaching the cultural existence of hip-hop as an urban lifestyle, we first acknowledge hip-hop's core 4 elements: breaking, MCing, graffiti art, and DJing. But when we actually begin to live hip-hop as a cultural lifestyle, we find that these initial core 4 elements expand into 5 more cultural elements: beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism. This approach to hip-hop is unique to this teaching, and so we call these redefined elements of hip-hop the definitions. This is what we know to be effective regarding the actual living of hip-hop. The definitions makes the best part of hip-hop a repeatable science, a science that when mastered offers special intellectual and creative abilities unique to the hip-hop experience. The language of the definitions unites the culture of hip-hop and approaches hip-hop as, again, a repeatable science that lays out a practical framework for the explaining of hip-hop's cultural elements and the passing on of vital cultural information. By learning how to speak and teach the language of the definitions, and by performing hip-hop's elements in this way, true hip-hoppers raise their own self-worth and artistic longevity, and protect hip-hop from foreign interpretation with our own cultural terminologies which correctly define us and what we are doing. In addition, not only does the language of the definitions increase the value of those that teach hip-hop for a living, but such a language unifies hip-hop's actual teachers speaking the same language. Here's a condensed definitions list. The full definitions list can be found in the original Gospel of Hip Hop, beginning at page 113. Breaking, the study and application of street dance forms, originally called the go-off, burn-in, and or boy-yoing-yoing. It is also commonly referred to as freestyle street dancing. Breaking is the cultural dance or hop of hip-hop. The practitioners of traditional breaking are called b-boys, B-girls, and breakers. MCing, the study and application of rhythmic talk, poetry, and divine speech. Commonly referred to as rapping or rap, its practitioners are known as MCs and rappers. Graffiti art, the study and application of street calligraphy, art, and handwriting. Commonly called aerosol art, writing, piecing, burning, graph, and urban murals. Other forms of this art include bombing and tagging. Its practitioners are known as writers, bombers, graffiti writers, aerosol artists, graffitiists, and graffiti artists. DJing, the study and application of rap music production, cutting, mixing, and scratching, as well as on-air radio broadcasting. Commonly refers to the work of a disc jockey. However, hip-hop's disc jockey doesn't just play vinyl records, tapes, and compact discs. Hip-hop's DJ interacts artistically with the performance of a recorded song by cutting, mixing, and scratching the song in all of its recorded formats. Its practitioners are known as turntablists, DJs, grandmasters, mixmasters, and jam masters. Beatboxing, the study and application of body music and body language. Commonly refers to the act of creating rhythmic sounds and language with various parts of the body, particularly the throat, mouth, and hands. Its practitioners are known as human beatboxers or human orchestras. Street fashion, the study and application of urban trends and styles, commonly refers to the clothing trends of urban centers. However, street fashion deals with all trends and styles of hip-hop's culture, what's in and what's out, regardless of the expression. Street fashion is the hip of hip-hop, being keenly aware of what is new and in style. Its practitioners are known as hip-hoppers or hip-hoppers. Street language, the study and application of street communication, commonly referred to as Black English, urban slang, and ebonics. It is hip-hop's urban language and linguistic codes, the verbal communication of the streets. Its practitioners are known as hip-hop. Street knowledge, the study and application of ancestral wisdom, commonly refers to the basic common sense and accumulated wisdom of urban families. It consists of techniques, phrases, codes, and terms used to survive modern urban life. Its practitioners are known as hip-hoppers, sisters, brothers, goddesses, gods, mothers, fathers, and so on, including street scholars, urban philosophers, teachers, and independent researchers. Street entrepreneurialism, the study and application of fair trade and hip-hop business management, commonly referred to as street trade, having game, the natural salesman, or the smooth diplomat. It is the readiness to engage in the creation of a business venture that brings about grassroots business practices. Many of hip-hop's apprenticeships begin here. Its practitioners are known as hustlers, entrepreneurs, and hip-hoppers, hip-hoppers. Hip-hop, our unique collective consciousness, the creative force behind hip-hop's elements. Hip-hop is the name of our collective consciousness. Hip-hop, spelled in this way, is the creation and development of breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism. Hip-hop is what we call ourselves and our activity in the world. Hip-hop is the name of our culture. Hip-hop, spelled in this way, is rap music product and those things and events associated with rap music entertainment and or its commerce. Hip-hop is a music genre. Hip-hop culture, hip-hop's culture or the hip-hop culture, is the name of our unique community of consciousness, guided by the principles established in the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. Hip hop culture is the manifested character, patterns, beliefs, and arts of our collective consciousness as hip hoppers. Hip hopper or hip hopper, an individual participating in hip hop's culture, a citizen of the hip hop nation. Hip hopian or Homo hip hopiensis is an ancient artistic hominin human character expressed as an inquisitive thirst for art, dance, writing, music, and invention. Found at the birth of our humanity, hip hopians are our ancient ancestors, the ancient ancestors of those that practice hip hop today. Hip hopians, in a modern sense, are the ascendants, the posterity, the offspring of Homo hip hopiensis. Hip hopia, the name of our collective consciousness as a city-state. Hip hopia is the domain of hip hop as consciousness. It is the environment of our collective hip hop consciousness. Most people, scholars included, use the term hip hop synonymously with rap music and rappers, but this usage is obviously incorrect. Of course, from a surface point of view, hip hop can be seen as a music genre. But the real truth of the matter is that hip hop is the behavior that produces our music, art, and our dances. Hip hop itself is not a music. Hip hop itself is not even an art form or a dance. Hip hop is the name of the awareness and or behavior that causes or produces such expressions. Traditionally, hip hop has been approached as an art form that consists of four core elements: breaking or breakdancing, emceeing or rap, aerosol art, graffiti writing, and DJing, the cutting, mixing, and scratching of recorded materials. These are called the core four elements of hip hop. Hip hop's core four elements, however, also come with specific and unique urban clothing styles, language styles, business and trade techniques, as well as a collective body of knowledge derived from its internal experiences with itself and the world. Breaking, emceeing, graffiti art, DJing, knowledge, and overstanding. These original hip-hop elements have created uniquely rich hip-hop stories, hip-hop legends and myths, original hip-hop arts, popular hip-hop music, and thought-provoking hip-hop poetry that critiques and interprets the world in which the hip-hop community exists. Yes, hip-hop is also a worldview, and it is the hip-hop worldview, its outlook, that causes its artistic elements to exist. Therefore, from our initial core four artistic elements, we expand into five more cultural elements: beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism. And notice the spellings here as well: breaking, emceeing, DJing, and beatboxing, as well as cutting, mixing, scratching, etc. These are not slang words or misspelled words. These are new words with new meanings. These are not only the spellings and the pronunciations of our unique street language. These spellings and pronunciations are to be pronounced as one would say or write dextrin, albumin, mucin, insulin, penicillin, etc. Breaking, emceeing, DJing, and beatboxing, as well as cutting, mixing, scratching, along with rocking, rapping, and chilling, are all new words with new meanings. No, the G at the end of these words is not missing. Again, in hip-hop's dialect, words like breaking, emceeing, and DJing, and the like, are to be pronounced and written as one would pronounce and or write words like virgin, heroin, and margin, even violin and Berlin. At first glance, hip-hop can be seen as simply an urban music genre inspired by the African American and Latino youth of the Bronx during the early 1970s. However, upon closer observation, hip-hop becomes a way of life, a specific way of being and seeing the world, a unique view of the world and world events. We are uniquely hip-hop because the repetition of such a unique being and seeing has created our specific hip-hop way of life. And it is the hip-hop way of life. This is what we call hip-hop's culture or hip-hop culture. As culture, hip-hop is the specific behaviors, traits, expressions, patterns, and institutions of our unique collective consciousness. Hip-hop, is our intellectual and artistic activity as well as the works produced by it. In light of these facts, the Temple of Hip-Hop teaches 9 elements to hip-hop: breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism. This is what hip-hop actually produces when practiced in real life. This is real hip-hop. This is how hip-hop manifests itself in the physical world. Be clear with this. When we say real hip-hop, we are not talking about the difference between what we hear promoted over the airwaves as rap music versus what we know to be original hip-hop. We're not critiquing the rap music styles of fake rappers versus real MCs. We're not doing that. Here, we are first approaching hip-hop as an actual thing with an actual objective existence like graffiti art, or like us when we express hip-hop as breaking or as MCing. Those that actually live hip-hop usually experience such a living subjectively. We are hip-hop. But to teach hip-hop, especially to a first-time audience, it is best to begin with what is already known about hip-hop objectively. Ultimately, for hip-hoppers, hip-hop is a subjective experience. It comes from us. But again, to begin our study of hip-hop to a mass audience, it is best to start our study objectively, based upon the observable phenomena of hip-hop in the material world. This can be done with audio recordings of all sorts: films, photographs, memorable flyers and posters, magazine articles, classic clothing and books, like dictionaries and encyclopedias that explain or describe what hip-hop looks like and or how it is experienced in the world. These kinds of materials describe hip-hop objectively, but in truth, hip-hop itself never enters the physical world. Hip-hop itself is a shared idea. Hip-hop is not an object. Hip-hop is a subject. You cannot go to hip-hop or eat hip-hop or wear hip-hop or even touch hip-hop. Again, hip-hop exists as a shared idea. It never enters physical reality. You cannot drink a can of hip-hop and suddenly know how to rap. You cannot put hip-hop on as clothing or read a book in order to understand hip-hop fully. Hip-hop begins as an attitude about oneself. Therefore, hip-hop becomes real to the physical world when we become it. One of the physical or observable parts of hip-hop is us, hip-hoppers. We bring hip-hop into physical reality by being it and expressing it. Thus the saying, we are not just doing hip-hop, we are hip-hop. The very name hip-hop is special. It is both a noun and a verb. As a noun, hip-hop is the name of our socio-political group in the world and in world history. It is the name of our culture and community. Yet, the same term, hip-hop, also describes what we are doing in the world. It describes our actions. What are you doing? Hip-hop. What is your name? Hip-hop. Therefore, as the name of our culture and community, it, hip-hop, is a proper noun and should be given the same grammatic respect of any proper noun. We are the unique individuals that the term hip-hop refers to. So when spelling hip-hop, we use 2 uppercase H's as hip-hop. Again, outside of music and entertainment, hip-hop itself is the name of our identity in the world and in world history. It, hip hop, is the name of our global community. It, hip hop, exists, and it exists as a specific thing and as a specific group of people in the known world. It, hip hop, then, is a proper noun. We can all see that when people hear the term hip hop, they don't think of other things or people, they think of us. The term hip hop cannot and does not describe or represent anyone except us, hip hoppers. Good or bad, happy or sad, liked or disliked, loved or hated, when the world hears the term hip hop, they think of us, rappers, breakdancers, DJs, and graffiti writers. There is nothing like us in the world. This is why the term hip hop is unique to us. It belongs to no one except us. It describes no one except us. There is nothing, and get this, there is nothing else that you could describe hip hop as except us or our collective activities. So again, hip hop, the word, is a proper noun. It, hip hop, is a specific thing in the world, and it is the name of our unique culture. It is for these reasons that I will say again that we spell hip hop with capital H's as a proper noun, as our proper name. Unless the term hip hop is being displayed in an art presentation, or if translated into another language or culture where the grammatical rules of the English language do not apply, or you are writing specifically about rap music and its related activities, hip hop should be spelled beginning with a capital H. Hip hop, capital H, I-P, space, capital H-O-P. Hip hop, correctly spelled here with two uppercase H's, is called the proper spelling of hip hop, or our proper name. Hip hop spelled in lowercase as hip hop, lowercase h-I-P, space or dash, lowercase h-o-p, is called the phonetic spelling of hip hop. As we can see in the Oxford English Dictionary's original definition of the term hip hop, it, hip hop, is pronounced with alterations of lighter and heavier vowels: drip drop, tip top, flip flop, hip hop. This is how hip hop is pronounced in the English language. Again, hip hop spelled in lowercase refers to rap music and entertainment related events. It is also the phonetic way of spelling hip hop. Lowercase hip hop, however, is how dictionaries of all sorts still spell hip hop, and this is how they approach it as a music genre, even though they listed hip hop as a culture, even as a subculture, which includes more than just music. But in fact, there is nothing sub about hip hop. Hip hop is the dominant urban culture in the world today. There is nothing sub about it or us. But when looking objectively at hip hop from the view of some early dictionary writers, we can see what we looked like to them and how they approached us as an urban community in the past. This is why we start our teaching of hip hop with what others outside of our culture think of us first. So, as we have just laid out, a noun is a person, place, or thing. A proper noun is a specific person, place, or thing. A unique person, place, or thing. Hip hop is a proper noun. Verbs, however, describe actions. Verbs are that part of speech that expresses existence, action, or occurrences. Transitive verbs are verbs or action words that require a direct object to complete their meanings. Hip hop, however, is not an object, it is a subject. And hip hop is a subject that does not require any object outside of itself to exist. For these reasons, hip hop is often referred to as an intransitive verb because hip hop, does not require a direct object to explain or complete its meaning or existence. Again, Hip-hop is not an object, it is a subject. It is something done that does not require a direct object to be done or to exist. It's like sleep or rain or even God. Returning to the Oxford English Dictionary, we see that the actual term hip-hop first appears in the English language around 1672, meaning, quote, reduplication of hop with alterations of lighter and heavier vowel, conferred or compared to drip-drop, tip-top, with hopping movement with successive hops, end quote. We also see one of the earliest phrases recorded in the English language regarding hip-hop was by the second Duke of Buckingham, George Villiers, as part of a play around the same year, 1672. As he was being dismissed from the ministry of Charles II for misconduct, he is said to have stated, quote, to go off hip-hop upon this occasion is 1,000 times better than any conclusion in the world. I gad, end quote. Here, we can see the term hip-hop beginning in the English language as a verb, as an action. But when this term, hip-hop, developed into the name of our culture, it went from being just a verb to also being a noun. Looking at the shorter Oxford English Dictionary, we see, quote, hip-hop, originally U.S., also hip-hop, reduplication of hip, used as a jingling refrain, conferred or compared to hip-a, bebop, hop, etc. The music associated with a young people's subculture of Black and Hispanic origin, comprising rap music, graffiti art, breakdancing, a distinctive style of dress, etc., end quote. But still, we are listed as a subculture. The most influential urban culture in the world is still depicted as a subculture. In any event, we can see that when the term hip-hop first appears in the English language as a verb, it was defined as the reduplication of hop. But as a noun, hip-hop becomes the reduplication of hip, used as a jingling refrain like hip hip hooray. This is an important distinction. We'll get back to hip later. Continuing here with the American Heritage Dictionary, we see, quote, hip-hop, one, a popular urban youth culture closely associated with rap music and with the style and fashions of African American inner city residents. 2. Rap music, of or characteristics of hip-hop culture, end quote. Notice how the American Heritage Dictionary uses the term hip-hop culture, but still spells the name of our culture in lowercase. And we have to be aware of this kind of degradation to our culture and fix it. As just mentioned, the initial letter at the front of the name of all cultures, nations, communities, tribes, and specialized groups of people are spelled as proper nouns, beginning with an uppercase letter or letters. We just went over this with the same American Heritage Dictionary, confirming, quote, proper noun, a noun belonging to a class of words used as names for unique individuals, events, or places, also called proper name. So what happened when it came to hip-hop? This is just one example as to how hip-hop is approached by some learning institutions, and again, hip-hop's teachers must be aware of this academic demeaning of hip-hop and correct it if and when possible. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Turning now to the Oxford Dictionary of New Words, we see hip-hop, quote, noun, a street subculture originally among urban teenagers in the U.S., which combines rap music, graffiti art, and breakdancing with distinctive codes of dress and speech. More specifically, the dance music of this subculture, which features rap frequently on political themes delivered above spare electronic backing and harsh rhythm tracks. Now stop here for a minute. We just read frequently on political themes delivered above spare electronic backing and harsh rhythm tracks. The correct term is frequently on political themes delivered above sparse electronic backing and harsh rhythm tracks. Now, spare may be used in a different context here, and that's what's actually written. But being hip hop and teaching it right now, the word sparse is a little more accurate to the electronic backing music that we are actually using. It's sparse, it's simple and light. There's not a lot going on with it. Let us continue. Here we see that dance is being used as the intransitive verb, as the thing done that does not require a direct object to be done or to be explained. Quote, formed by combining the adjective hip in its slang sense cool with the noun hop, which also had a well-established slang sense dance, hip-hop had existed as an adverb, meaning with hopping movements, since the 17th century. But hip-hop as a noun was quite a separate development. Its adoption as the name of the subculture and its music may have been influenced by the catchphrase hip-hop bebop, chanted by the disc jockey and rapper Lovebug Starsky in the form, to the hip-hop, don't stop that body rock. Hip-hop originated among young blacks and Hispanics in New York in the late 70s, but it and the term were first widely publicized in the early 80s. In the US, the name was used to refer to the assertive and showy culture as a whole, with its visible and flamboyant street manifestations and its related dress and hairstyles. Break dancing and crews of graffiti artists leaving their tag signatures are typical parts of the hip-hop scene. The word was first imported to Britain to refer specifically to the music when it became popular in the clubs in the mid-80s, though the dress and general culture have also since taken root among British urban blacks. Its popularity as a dance music has led to the development of the verb hip-hop and the action noun hip-hopping. Someone who listens or dances to the music or follows the hip-hop culture in general is a hip-hopper. Adherents may consider themselves or be described as part of the hip-hop community or hip-hop nation, end quote. The Hip-Hoptionary, the Dictionary of Hip-Hop Terminology by Alonzo Westbrook, lists hip-hop as, quote, the artistic response to oppression, a way of expression in dance, music, word, song, a culture that thrives on creativity and nostalgia. As a musical art form, it is the stories of inner city life, often with a message spoken over beats of music. The culture includes rap and any other venture spawned from the hip-hop style and culture, end quote. The Encyclopedia of Rap and Hip-Hop Culture by Yvonne Bino credits DJ Lovebug Starsky with first using the term hip-hop to describe the new music and subculture. DJ Hollywood, Chief Rocker Busy Bee, Africa Bambaataa, as well as Keith Cowboy from the Furious Five and the Sugar Hill Gang are also recognized for their popularizing of the term hip-hop. The word hip in hip-hop means keenly aware, to have knowledge of, to be informed, and to be up to date, even in style and fashionable. Hip, in a social sense, can mean keenly aware of what is new and in style. But the word hip, as it relates to hip-hop, begins as the ancient African hippie, H-I-P-I, meaning to know or to be aware, as well as to open one's eyes, which in Africa becomes the common hip, meaning aware. With hippie and hip, meaning aware and awareness, and kat, C-A-T, meaning person, hippie becomes hippicat, Hipicat, meaning one who is attuned to one's environment, or one whose eyes are open. This word hippicat, also believed to have been spoken by the Wolof people of West Africa, was then popularized through jazz culture as hepcat and later as hip and as hep, both meaning keenly aware and in style. Military culture on land, in sea, and in air also had much to do with the spread of both hip and hep. Looking at slang, a topic-by-topic dictionary of contemporary American lingos by Paul Dixon, we see the word hip, 1, POW Air Force. Then it says, quote, aware, connotes understanding and familiarity with drug scene and or the radical view of political activity. 2, to make aware, to inform. She hipped me to the fact that there was some quick money to be made, end quote. The interesting thing here in this definition is that it comes from the Air Force's attempt to understand and then teach to the returning prisoners of the Vietnam War what their children might be speaking like when they, the POWs, returned home. Explaining how to read his dictionary, Slang, author Paul Dixon explains, quote, what follows is a collection of the slang of then, which is in large part still in use now. In order to give this slang a special sense of time and history, 86 of the terms are labeled POW Air Force. These were terms the U.S. Air Force compiled and defined in 1973 for the prisoners of war returning from Vietnam. The glossary of 160 terms was called semi-official and was based on a poll of POW families to see which terms were actually in use in their homes. It was published by the Air Force with this comment: we hesitate whether or not to call the language progress, but facts are facts. This is part of the slang being used by your sons and daughters. The main purpose is to get you and your offspring off to somewhat of an equal start, end quote. Returning to the Oxford English Dictionary, we first see hip, slang, originally U.S., origin unknown, hep, hence hipcat, hepcat, hipness, the condition or quality of being hip. Not only do we see the hip and hep connection, but we also see that in the Oxford English Dictionary, hip is listed as unknown, when every serious word scholar knows that hip is a West African term for aware and awareness. Another correction here. This is called cultural bias, and you see this a lot in the Oxford English Dictionary and its approaches to African and Native American words. But it is this alternative etymology of hip that we are most interested in here. We also see that hip, meaning being aware, also shares an etymology with fishing culture as well, causing many black folks in the 1930s to associate being aware with having one's boots on. Taking a closer look at the etymological examples given for the usages of hip throughout the 1950s, we see first at 1951 San Diego Evening Tribune, 28 June, quote, we did it because we thought it was hip or smart, end quote. Then we see at 1958 W. Bryant, Jive in Hi-Fi, 13, quote, the correct word is hip. It comes from a story of a fisherman warning young fishermen never to wade in deep water without hip boots on because they could run into trouble. So when you hear the words, I'm hip or I'm booted, it's said to let you know they have no fear of trouble or that they understand what's shaking or happening, end quote. From the early 1700s onward, hip meant being informed or aware about something or someone. I'm hip to this, or I'm hip to that. Or like when it was said by the Watts poets, the last poets hipping many cats. Hip is a form of awareness, a knowing. It is to be conscious and intelligent. Again, it is being keenly aware, not just aware, but keenly aware. The word keen means a fine, sharp cutting edge or point. When applied to thinking, it means having or marked by intellectual quickness and acuity. It means to be acutely sensitive. Here, we can see that hip hop is a mental ability. You don't handle hip hop with your hands. You handle hip hop with your mind. Our keenly aware hip hop style of knowing is far more powerful and effective than anything we have been taught in public school. Such knowing is not necessarily an educated style of knowing, but more of an intuit knowing. It is the ability to know without being taught, to understand automatically. Such knowing is part of your genetic memory. It is part of the abilities that you were born with. This is your cultural language, your ancestral connection to that which actually defines you. In fact, the phrase keenly aware points directly to the character of the hip-hop mind. In his book, Hip, The History, by John Leland, John Leland writes, quote, Clarence Major in his study Juba to Jive, a dictionary of African American slang, traces the origins of hip to the Wolof verb hepi, to see, or hippie, to open one's eyes, and dates its usage in America to the 1700s. So from the linguistic start, hip is a term of enlightenment, cultivated by slaves from the West African nations of Senegal and coastal Gambia, end quote. We'll get back to this in our next lesson on culture, but as we can plainly see with etymological and linguistic evidence, the first word in our name, hip-hop, points literally to high intelligence and being keenly aware. Now let's look at hop in the name hip-hop. The word hop in hip-hop means the act or the action of hopping, a short spring or leap, especially on one foot. It means to move by leaps. Hop is also associated with dancing and a dancing party, especially the informal, unceremonious kind of partying, a jam, or again, a dance. As said in the 1950 song by Danny and the Juniors, let's go to the hop, oh baby, let's go to the hop. But generally, as it pertains to hip hop, hop means both to dance, a dance, or party, and to move by leaps with both feet or by one foot as opposed to walking or running. In hop's etymology, we also see to spring a short way upon the ground or any surface with an elastic or bounding movement or succession of such movements said of persons, animals, and things. Formerly a general synonym of leap, now implying a short or undignified leap. But there's more. As just mentioned, hop is also associated with dancing and a dancing party, especially the informal, unceremonious kind of party, a jam, or again, a dance. This is interesting to the identification of our hip-hop past, what we identify with, what we are one with. As culture, as civilization, as a specific socio-political group in the world, the questions are, what looks like us in world history? Who looks like us in American history, especially in English American colonial history? It is there where we may also see our ancestral selves more clearly. Looking at the word hop, meaning dancing, and a dancing party, especially the informal, unceremonious kind of party, we come to the ancient term powwow. We come to this term not only because powwow the MC, was one of the founding members of Zulu Nation and a member of the Soul Sonic Force that actually dressed like an Indian chief while performing. But the actual term powwow matches precisely what we hip-hop are doing at our informal, unceremonious kinds of parties. And again, we are only using the terms that are associated with our hip-hop culture and our hip-hop people. These terms, titles, and names are what we called ourselves without any knowledge of the etymologies or the alternative definitions of these terms, titles, and names. We are all just calling ourselves what we feel. We are all just calling ourselves what we feel is appropriate to our character. And we seem to be accurate according to world history. This is our culture at work within us. Turning again to the compact edition of the Oxford English Dictionary, we see the word powwow or powwow, meaning a priest, sorcerer, or medicine man of the North American Indians. What's interesting here in this first definition is that in the above etymology of the word powwow, powwow, we see that it's originally an Algonquin word, which I doubt originally meant just a priest, a sorcerer, or a medicine man. So what was, or who was, the original powwow? Looking further at definition 2, we see powwow and powwow to mean a ceremony of the North American Indians, especially one where magic was practiced and feasting and dancing indulged in. Also, a council of Indians or conference with them. Now look at this. First, we must understand that this definition is an objective one. Whoever is writing this definition is definitely not Indian. As a result, you don't really get a definition. You get more of a legendary remembrance of the many meetings, powwows, white folk had with indigenous black folks in the Americas. Keep in mind that the same kind of encounters are happening all over the earth. Indigenous black people are partying all over the world. But we can still see hints and traces of a familiar attitude and outlook about life on both sides in this Oxford definition. First, we see that a powwow is a person. Then we see that a powwow is an event. Then we see that a powwow is a council of Indians. And finally, we see that a powwow is to have a conference with this Indian council. So we can see that the outsider has no idea what he is seeing and or recording. To the outsider, these highly intelligent beings, which these outsiders are calling Indians, are having they're having the time of their lives, these Indians. These are not a poor and unskilled people. Poor and unskilled are not indulging in feasting and dancing. These are a wealthy people, a skilled people, and whatever these highly intelligent beings were doing during this gathering, jam, looked like magic to the outsiders. In addition, whatever this event was with music, dancing, eating, smoking, and all the rest, including high technology resembling magic, this is also where the council was and where many meetings between this Indian council and English colonists took place. Now get this. The powwow is both a person as well as a council of people. Today, a crew, a squad, a posse, a gang, with or without leadership. This is hip hop. The powwow is a ceremony, and the powwows are the masters of this ceremony where magic was practiced and feasting and dancing indulged in. This too is hip hop. It was here that you communicated with the masters of the ceremony, the ones producing the ceremony, the jam, the Council of Indians. And if we look closely at this Oxford definition of powwow, We see that to communicate with these powwows, you had to powwow yourself. You had to do or become some element of the powwow ceremony itself, or you were not accepted into the powwow. You couldn't communicate. This too is hip hop. Again, all of this points to the cultural structure of hip hop today. To really communicate with hip hoppers, you have to do or be some aspect of hip hop. We can also see that in the early days of hip hop, our unique dancing, art, rapping, and DJing were all seen as literal magic to those on the outside of our culture. The moonwalk, popping, and electric boogie alone dazzled people. It's the same culture. Hip hop and indigenous cultures all over the world are the same. Hip hop and most indigenous cultures around the world share this same basic character and interests. If we had it our way, we would party all day, every day, all year, forever. Our society would be governed and was governed by peace, love, unity, and safely having fun. We needed nothing else to govern us. Some might critique this vision and lifestyle as childish, fantastic, and unrealistic, even foolish. But in real-world history, even within the histories documented by English colonists, our real ancestors lived like this. They were a party people. Yes, when colonial white folks first appeared on the shores of many indigenous black lands, we were engaged in serious partying. This, of course, is not all that we were doing, but that the gathering, the feast, the jam was always the end result to whatever we were doing. Having fun and living in peace and prosperity, this is the legacy of our real hip-hop heritage. This is the legacy of our real culture. Hip-hop is just bringing it all back for us. Call it a coincidence or whatever, but when the facts line up, the facts just line up. Hop means to move by leaping forward, and it is also associated with informal, unceremonious partying where dancing occurs. Again, this definition to hop matches our cultural existence precisely. The hop is the ceremony that we are mastering. Hip is the mind or consciousness of the hop. Hip is the collective consciousness of our culture, and hop is its movement or its dance. So together, hip as a form of awareness or intelligence, and hop as a form of movement, dancing, or springing upward, when associated with hip hop, literally means intelligence or intelligent hip, moving or movement hop. Hip hop literally means intelligence moving, consciousness springing up, or a movement aware of itself. Consciousness or intelligence, awareness, hip, springing forward, leaping up and dancing, hop. The very name hip hop factually points to a movement aware of itself, a hip hop, a hop or movement aware of itself, hip. Here, hip hop reveals itself as the dancing of the mind or the moving of consciousness. As we can see, our sacred name is accurate to our ancestral being. We are hip hop. And what we do is hip hop within hip hop. Not only does the very name of hip hop reveal hip hop itself to be self-aware, but the hip hopper then is also the consciousness that is moving, the awareness of the movement itself. The hip hopper or hip hopper is the hip, the knower, the being, the awareness, hopping, moving, leaping up and springing forward. Here, we can begin to see real hip hop emerging as a form of enlightenment, as a form of self-awareness, as a self-aware way to be, where the attuned hip hopper declares, I am hip to my hop. I know why I move. External stimuli do not move me anymore. My senses do not move me anymore either. I move me now. I am hip to my hop. My principles move me. My divine character moves me. My ancestors guide me. I am more than just me. I am a continuation of my culture. I am hip to my cultural hop, to my cultural movement. I know why we move. This now returns us to our subjective understanding of hip hop as hip awareness and hop movement. What more are we than awareness moving, consciousness in motion, thought in action? Before any title or name, before woman, man, girl, boy, daughter, son, wife, husband, aunt, uncle, mother, father, and so on, before any title, even your own name, you are actually and factually intelligence or consciousness moving. You are aware, hip to your moving, hop. This is where we start our teaching and ourselves as simply intelligent beings moving, leaping, and springing forward. We are a specific group of hips hopping. And this is how we approach all living beings. Beyond anyone's opinion about rap music and rappers, this is what the word hip hop means factually and literally. And this is how true hip hoppers, the true hip hop scholars, I should say, approaches the learning, the teaching, and the being of hip hop. For us hip hoppers, hip hop is a creative environment that transforms subjects and objects to meet our needs. This creative environment or activity, hip-hopia, is a reality maker that one becomes in order to fully understand and make use of. We first saw this reality-making ability studying the experiments of Grandmaster Flash, among others, that were able to transform certain subjects and or objects in an effort to physically manifest that which was only an idea a moment ago. As simple as this ability may seem to be coming from my mouth, it is its application that is most astonishing. How Grandmaster Flash transformed the turntable from an appliance like a stove, a refrigerator, or a blender into a musical instrument like a guitar or a saxophone or a drum is but one of the traits or principles, abilities of hip hop as consciousness. Studying Grandmaster Flash's display of mind over matter, we see how, because of Flash's ability to perceive outside of what was standard for turntables, mixers, and phonograph records at the time, he was able to repurpose them, transforming the use of them to fit his imagination, thus transforming their actual functions, definitions, and uses in the whole of the American society and the world. This ability to transform subjects and objects to perform according to one's perception of them is one of the forgotten traits or abilities of hip hop. This ability is what really gave rise to several of hip hop's artistic and cultural innovations. The ability to rethink one's environment in an effort to transform it or escape it. Faced with an unjust situation that appeared to offer no way out, we simply transformed ourselves. When we transformed what we thought of ourselves, the unjust situations no longer affected us in the horrible ways that it did. Our inner view of ourselves transformed our run-down and burnt-out neighborhoods into endless streams of new ideas. The Bronx in the 1970s and 1980s, as just one example, was a hopeless, horribly corrupt, and poverty-stricken environment. But those of us living in the Bronx, enlightened by our hip-hop awareness, began to look at the Bronx not according to how it actually was, but and also not how it was actually presented to us, but instead we modified how we saw ourselves within the Bronx. The Bronx did not change, We did. Even though the Bronx in the 1970s and 1980s was a hopeless situation for young people at that time, it was our hip hop awareness that wrote songs about it. We wrote on subway trains and on buses, on walls of already abandoned buildings, rat-infested buildings. And we used the garbage all around us as our musical instruments. Instead of accepting or even fighting against the degrading epithets hurled at us from others, we simply created an entirely different dialect to describe ourselves and our environment. Words like fresh, dope, fly, chill, chill out, and diss, among other words, revealed an entirely new world to us. Over the years, however, these acts and linguistic transformations and phonological modifications made us popular and then valuable and then rich and then globally respected and recognized by all those that knew where we came from. These acts, however, made us popular and valuable and then rich and globally famous. These are facts. But it all began with how we viewed ourselves. Again, the South Bronx nor the West Bronx changed. None of this changed. It was we that changed. This is something that we might need to adapt or express again today against the challenges facing us right now. This transformative attitude about ourselves was the beginning of a new self and a new environment. This attitude about ourselves became our arts, our dances, and our view of reality. From nothing to something, we created our hip-hop reality with our very being. We believed ourselves into existence. This we must never forget.
An Introduction to Hip Hop, Lesson 2.
As mentioned in our previous segment, this Authentic Hip Hop Studies course is designed to correctly inform and adequately empower those that teach or would like to teach hip hop from a cultural perspective. When teaching hip hop in this way, it is important to understand that you are first teaching hip hop to hip hoppers. You are first teaching hip hoppers about themselves. The teaching of hip hop is not an entertainment for those outside of our culture. The real teaching of hip hop begins with the empowerment of the hip hopper. Therefore, when teaching hip hop to students for the first time, the first basic question to ask is, why is hip hop important to know? What are the advantages of being culturally literate of hip hop? The first answer reveals that in the 21st century, how can you not be aware of hip hop? As an average person living every day in the United States and even in other parts of the world, the cultural elements of hip hop are seen every day and everywhere. 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, you may have been able to get away with not knowing what hip hop was. But today, in modern times, this is unacceptable. Our music, our distinct urban dialect, and our clothing alone are seen and heard all over the American society regularly every day, all day. How then can you not be aware of the existence of hip hop? Graffiti art is everywhere, legally and illegally. Hip hop style graffiti art is everywhere. Rap music and rap-related music are heard regularly throughout American society, on the streets, in the restaurants, in the schools, in the churches, on the radio, on television, in cars, on the internet, even in the government, everywhere. In fact, mayors, senators, and other government officials regularly ask hip-hoppers to help them win elections and advise them on matters relating to urban challenges. To not know what hip hop is, or why hip hop is, where hip hop is, and who hip hop is then, is to walk around blind to a large part of human activity in the United States and in the world. Not only is hip hop the dominant urban culture in the world and the most popular music, dance, and art in the world, hip hop is an American-born culture. To be ignorant of hip hop is to be ignorant of modern American culture. To put it frankly, how can you be an American and not know what hip hop is, or even why hip hop is, or even who hip hop is? Even those in other countries that are studying the United States or American history, what part of urban America are you studying void of hip hop? So, why is hip hop important to know? Hip hop is important to know first because it is all around you. It is an intricate part of American as well as world culture. Secondly, why is hip hop important to know? Because like anything, if you don't know the real from the fake, you could be taken advantage of. As I just stated, presently, mass media outlets of all sorts deliberately criminalize hip hop for profit. They deliberately criminalize hip hop as a foul-mouthed, explicitly violent, over-sexualized, drug-dealing culture, exclusively, when in truth, it is not. But if your interpretation of hip hop comes from the stories and the images you hear and see produced by Hollywood and other corporate media outlets, then you are indeed being taken advantage of. As a result, you may be making assumptions and even decisions about hip hop and those that participate in it based upon media hype and false information regarding hip hop. Thirdly, why is hip hop important to know? Hip hop promotes the use of one's human skills over technological dependency. Hip hop's artistic elements, just breaking, MCing, and graffiti art, and beatboxing, are among the last things that humans can still do without technological or mechanical assistance. Most people feel that if they do not rap or break or do aerosol art, that they have no need to understand hip hop. And they are partially correct until they are reminded that hip hop is among the last of the human skills. Hip hop is natural to humanity. It doesn't matter what you may think of rap music or rappers, rapping itself is still a human skill. Beyond its entertainment value, hip hop itself is an ability natural to humanity. In fact, rapping is one of the last things modern humans can still do today without technological dependency. Plus, rap, which is rhythmic speech, and its brother, breaking, which is rhythmic dance, are both physically healthy and mentally stimulating. Breaking is physical exercise and MCing is mental exercise. It doesn't matter what these activities are in the music and theater industries. Breaking and MCing alone as human exercises for both mind and body are simply healthy for human beings. This is simply a fact. Breaking moves are used in aerobics and other exercises that refine the body and relieve stress. Dance appears at the genesis of human awareness and remains at the center of good health. Breaking, or break dancing, gets our hearts pumping at about 120 beats per minute. And if we can break, or dance, at least 3 times a week for only 20 minutes, we would have enhanced our physical health and prolonged our very lives by years. MCing is the mastery of the spoken word. It is in the mastering of MCing that we also express our inherent understanding of rhythm, linguistics, physics, mathematics, memory, logical reasoning, and of course, high communication skills. MCing also expresses a total integration of right and left brain coordination. We can see that when we look at breaking, MCing, and beatboxing closely, you see that they require no electricity or other power source to function and no external technologies to exist at all. This is important to those concerned about their dependency upon technology to live and express themselves. You can produce and perform the acts of breaking, emceeing, and beatboxing anywhere and at any time with no technological assistance at all, without any money or clothing or even a microphone or any recording devices, without even light. You could still produce breaking, emceeing, and beatboxing at will. Again, these sacred elements to our culture require no technology to exist at all. They are all healthy human skills. It doesn't matter what we may think of certain b-boys or b-girls and or rappers. Breaking and emceeing are simply healthy human skills, and they are in demand. This brings us to our fourth point. Why is hip-hop important to know? As a career and as a source of income, hip-hop is in demand all over the world. Those in college right now should pay special attention to this part right here. The mastery of hip-hop produces a life of enhanced health, love, awareness, and wealth. Yes, wealth. Hip-hop is a billion-dollar culture. There is no reason then why its teachers or its students, apprentices, should struggle to survive. The mastery of hip-hop, even one of its elements, is sure to literally pay off. But the key word here is mastery. You have to take hip-hop seriously, practicing its elements and its cultural character to the point of mastery. And this introduction to hip-hop is a good start on that path. This very study and its language is designed to unite hip-hop's authentic teachers and raise the value of those that do teach hip-hop professionally. Yes, hip-hop is in demand all over the world, and this is a good reason to have some knowledge of it and to take it, hip-hop, as serious as one would take any other practice or discipline that requires perfection and professional excellence. In fact, hip-hop provides the same, or even a better, quality of life and lifestyle that one would find among successful doctors, lawyers, politicians, athletes, and so on. Simple and plain, hip-hop is important to know because it can feed you. Fifth point, why is hip-hop important to know? Because for some of us, hip-hop is our authentic culture. It is how we behave, how we communicate, how we dress, and how we are as a people. It is also our livelihood, our source of income, our global reputation, our heritage. Hip-hop belongs to us. For hip-hoppers, hip-hop is important to know because it belongs to us. Hip-hop belongs to us, and the most important thing to know and to have in life is what is rightfully yours. When you know what belongs to you and what is rightfully yours, such knowledge brings direction and confirmation to your life. This is the beginning of one's value in the world. This is the beginning of one's identity and reputation in the world, one's heritage. That which is rightfully yours defines you, protects you, and provides for you. Your heritage is what is rightfully yours. This is what belongs to you. This is what you have been given by your ancestors, by your bloodline, by your family. This is what defines your responsibilities to yourself and to your community. But if you are not taught your heritage from a young age, or in your older age, you have been convinced to look down upon or ignore your own heritage, then it is clear why we as a people remain in poverty ourselves, while others extract our very wealth from us. Heritage is your first value, before money. Heritage determines what your value is in a society and in the world. Your heritage is your group reputation. It's what people know you as. Hip-hop is our heritage. And here, hip-hop is important to know because this is a value that belongs to you. This is what belongs to you, and anything that belongs to you or even defines you, you should have an extensive knowledge of. To be a real member of any culture, you have to know the culture. How can you claim a culture or make money from a culture you know nothing about? Such is the character of an exploiter, and this is not what a true teacher of hip-hop is. An effective hip-hop education is concerned with the life and well-being of the hip-hopper. This is the most fundamental thing to subjectively feel regarding hip-hop and your success in it, that which belongs to you empowers you, protects you, and supports your well-being. Likewise, that which is rightfully yours, you also seek to empower, protect, and support. This is the relationship a real hip-hop teacher has with hip-hop. Unlike those that may simply enjoy rap music, hip-hop is where the hip-hop teacher belongs. And once you know where you belong, you always have what you need. Nothing else satisfies you like what is rightfully yours. You could have nothing. No food, no shelter, no clothing, no companionship, and no money. Nothing. Not even knowledge. But if you have what is rightfully yours, you are where you're supposed to be, and you are ultimately, or should I say, you ultimately have what you need. You are being your true self. This is peace, the true meaning of success in hip-hop. Here, you are whole and complete. Such an awareness causes peace and power wherever you are. You are finally content with yourself. You are content with hip-hop. Hip-hop is enough for you. Others may have money, power, and or respect in other areas of life and career, but you have hip-hop. A sixth point as to why hip-hop is important to know reveals the fact that, again, for those of us that are actually hip-hop, the hip-hop character, its attitude, its worldview, the hip-hop way to be, our culture, has proven itself to be the way in which a large portion of the whole world sees itself. This is remarkable unto itself, that a group of kids from the Bronx would develop an expression that would also match the core being of everyone else in the world living in the same or similar urban situations. This means that our hip-hop way to be is not only cosmopolitan, but it is also empowering and uplifting to other people, supposedly unlike ourselves, in other parts of the world. People that we do not know and have never met are still impressed with what they see of us, and they are so impressed that many are willing to adopt our way to be as their way to be. Hip-hop is important to know because it produces a protective, cosmopolitan character suitable for navigating the urban environments of foreign lands. As the globally accepted way to be, or should I say, as a globally accepted way to be in urban environments, knowledge of hip-hop and even the adoption of its cultural character becomes a kind of urban protection. Those that identify with hip-hop in foreign lands will also identify with you. As hip-hop, you are cosmopolitan. You are always at home. Every city is your home because your culture is globally accepted and respected. In addition, those that know that you are authentically hip-hop also know that you are not to be fucked with. Hip-hop is important to know because it is a globally accepted way to be in many of the world's urban environments. It is like a protection. Here, hip-hop is important to know because to understand hip-hop then is to understand the world and the world's urban people regardless of language, race, or class. Finally, why is hip-hop important to know? Because no one is going to tell us how great we are, or when we've achieved a great victory, or even when we have overcome the traps, the obstacles, and the temptations other competing cultures have set for us. If you are hip-hop, hip-hop is important to know because this is what you did in the world. Hip-hop is what you culturally did and added to the world. And if you don't know what you and your culture did in the world, you won't be able to articulate any legitimate claims of authenticity, authority, or even citizenship within such a culture. Others that do know of your cultural legacy and can articulate it to others will then claim your legacy for themselves, as some are already doing, or downplay and demean your legacy, as others have already done, simply because you lack the knowledge and the language to articulate with evidence and precedence what your culture is and what it means to the world. Hip-hop is important to know because no one is going to tell you how great you are or how great your culture is, especially not over their own. So in summary, why is hip-hop important to know? First, because hip-hop is the world's dominant urban culture. It is everywhere. How can you not know what and who and where hip-hop is in the 21st century? Secondly, why is hip-hop important to know? Because if you don't know the real from the fake, you could be taken advantage of. Learning of hip-hop from mass media outlets is not how one gains an accurate awareness of what, who, and where hip-hop is. Third, why is hip-hop important to know? It is because hip-hop and its cultural elements are human skills. Beyond their entertainment value, hip-hop's cultural elements, breaking, MCing, and beatboxing alone, among others, are simply healthy for human beings to practice. These sacred elements to our culture are also healing. Fourth, why is hip-hop important to know? Because hip-hop, as well as its cultural elements, are in demand all over the world. Simple and plain, hip-hop can feed you. As a career, either as a teacher of hip-hop or as a performer of hip-hop, hip-hop can feed you. Fifth, why is hip-hop important to know? Because if you are hip-hop, hip-hop belongs to you. It is rightfully yours, and you should know everything you can about that which is rightfully yours. Six, why is hip-hop important to know? Because hip-hop is a cosmopolitan character. A large portion of the whole world agrees with our way of being. Not only does the hip-hop character protect the hip-hopper in urban environments all over the world, but an understanding of hip-hop reveals the understanding of a large part of the world as well. This means that hip-hop is indeed the true world order. Finally, why is hip-hop important to know? Because as we have just pointed out, no one is obligated to tell you how great you are, or when we have, overcome some great challenge. It is we that must practice articulating the greatness of our own culture and cultural existence. We do this not to brag about ourselves or place ourselves above others, but we have learned now that if you do not proclaim your existence and the greatness of it, if you do not proclaim your real achievements in the world as an individual or as a group, others are sure to take advantage of your silence or inarticulation. Much of hip-hop's early inventions and discoveries were taken from us in this very way. Hip-hop's actual originators and pioneers simply did not take credit for what they brought into the world. And as a result, others are now claiming their work. So why is hip-hop important to know? Because only we, hip-hop, are going to determine and acknowledge just how great we really are. Hip-hop is important to know because as a means of cultural survival, we have to believe in, love, and know ourselves. Let's take another break. I'll be right back.
An Introduction to Hip Hop, Lesson 3.
So when we say that hip hop is our culture, what exactly do we mean? What exactly are we teaching as culture? Before we explain what our culture is and what it means to us, let us first take a look at the several standard definitions of the word culture, beginning with the Oxford English Dictionary. Here we see culture, 5, quote, the training, development, and refinement of the mind, taste, and manners. The condition of being thus trained and refined, the intellectual side of civilization. B, a particular form or type of intellectual development, end quote. Next, we have the new shorter Oxford English Dictionary with a more expanded definition. Here we see culture, 4, quote, the cultivation or development of the mind, manners, etc. Improvement by education and training, 5. Refinement of mind, taste, and manners, artistic and intellectual development, the artistic and intellectual side of civilization. 6. A particular form, stage, or type of intellectual development or civilization in a society. A society or group characterized by its distinctive customs, achievements, products, outlook, etc. 7. The distinctive customs, achievements, products, outlooks, etc. of a society or group, the way of life of a society or group, end quote. Looking now at the American Heritage Dictionary, 2nd edition, we see culture, quote, the totality of socially transmitted behavior patterns, arts, beliefs, institutions, and all other products of human work and thought characteristic of a community or population. 2. A style of social and artistic expression peculiar to a society or class. 3. Intellectual and artistic activity and the works produced by it. 4. The act of developing the social, moral, and intellectual faculties through education. 5. A high degree of taste and refinement formed by aesthetic and intellectual training. 6. The development of the body through special training. End quote. Basically, culture is the arts, beliefs, behavior patterns, traits, customs, institutions, and other products of a social group's specific works and thoughts considered as a whole. This is what we are talking about here when we say hip-hop's culture or the hip-hop culture. Here we are talking about a particular form, stage, and type of intellectual development unique to our group and to our group experiences. Here, we are talking about a specific group in the United States and in other parts of the world, characterized by its distinctive customs, achievements, products, and collective outlook on life and living. This forms the unique and distinct hip-hop way of life of and for our particular social group. As we can see, the history of hip-hop's culture is not the history of hip-hop's music. Hip-hop's real history as culture reveals, quote, the totality of our socially transmitted behavior patterns, arts, beliefs, and institutions, end quote. And all of our other products of human work and thought characteristic of our hip-hop community, population, which includes our music. This is our culture. And even as music, dance, and art, our style of social and artistic expression is peculiar and particular to our social group. No one in the world sounds like us, or looks like us, or expresses themselves artistically or intellectually like us, hip-hop. Our distinctive customs, achievements, products, and collective worldview and outlook are unique in the world. There is nothing like us. Hip-hop as culture is the intellectual and artistic activities of our particular socio-political group and the works produced by it. Us. Simply put, hip-hop is our cultural way of life. Hip-hop as music, lowercase hip-hop, is called rap. And as we have said now for many years, rap is something we do, while hip-hop is something we live. And there is a difference. We don't live rap music. We live hip-hop, which produces our rapping, our dancing, our art, and our music. It is first our worldview, our outlook, our culture that determines what is going to be said, done, or shown. Also cited in the definition of culture, we also see that culture refers to the cultivation or development of one's mind and manners, etc. This definition includes an improvement by education and training, refinement of mind, taste, and manners, as well as artistic and intellectual development. This is culture. Here we can see that culture includes being cultured. And being cultured has to do with a certain refinement of mind, taste, and manners, as well as a refinement of one's artistic and intellectual abilities according to the standards of one's organic culture. This, however, is the primary purpose of hip-hop's teachers. This is the goal. It is the refinement of one's hip-hop mind, taste, and manners, as well as a refinement of one's artistic and intellectual abilities. This is the point to a proper hip-hop education. It is to refine the mind, as well as the taste, the manners, and the artistic and intellectual abilities of the practicing hip-hopper. Knowing about the recording sales and streaming views of popular rappers and DJs just cannot compare to knowing what belongs to you and the refinement of one's own mind and behavior in that. You could say all day that you are a citizen of hip-hop's global culture, but without a refinement of mind, of taste, of manners toward hip-hop and hip-hoppers, which shows in your behavior, you are only playing games with yourself, respectfully. Here it is deeds that matter, not just words. More than one's artistic ability, it is also one's character and one's responses to the facts that determine how serious one is about hip-hop and to one's teaching of it. Therefore, hip-hop's real teachers are also in the process of refining their own minds and their own manners and tastes, which are expressed in the behaviors of those real hip-hop teachers. Remember, you can't give what you ain't got. And equally, you can't teach what you don't know. If your mind is not culturally refined, how then can you expect to refine the minds of others? The hip-hop teacher has first mastered hip-hop's teachings for herself or himself. This goes far beyond being able to recite the influential lyrics of rappers. This is about what kind of an adult are you going to be? What is your outlook? More than simply a music genre, the term hip-hop defines our being and how we see the world. Is your worldview identical with those that practice hip-hop? Or do you simply like to rap? Is hip-hop really your culture? In the past, some argued that hip-hop was not a culture and that you couldn't actually be hip-hop. Of course, they made the mistake of comparing their knowledge of traditional cultures to hip-hop's culture. But as hip-hop professor Dr. Zizwe Mtafuta Ukweli, Professor Z, has pointed out, quote, culture is the character of a living entity. That entity could be an organism or an entire generation functioning as an organism. Every culture has its linchpin aspects or that which makes its membership pledge allegiance to it. Culture also provides a fence around the collective epic memory of the group which accepts this memory as its philosophy and history. Professor Z continues, quote, our culture, hip-hop, is strengthened through a heightened self-awareness and a heightened awareness of the surrounding environment. For every young culture, the relationship between it and its environment is dynamic and determinate. The culture seeks to absorb all it can from the environment, yet must prevent itself from being totally absorbed by the environment. Total absorption by the environment means certain death for any culture. Part of any cultural identity is distinctiveness. This is why hip-hop is so successful. As a young culture, hip-hop absorbs the music of blues, gospel, rock, soul, and jazz, but is absorbed by none of them. End quote. We could see this activity at all scales of nature, where the universe is producing self-organizing systems which are created by their environments, yet remain distinct from their environments. In this example, hip-hop is like a quantum, a packet of wholeness, something made from its environment but remains distinct within it, like a tornado. Our culture, hip-hop, begins as a non-material culture. You don't handle hip-hop with your hands, you first handle hip-hop with your mind. As mentioned earlier, hip-hop begins as a shared idea. It, hip-hop, is the name of our unique collective urban consciousness, which refers to the values, beliefs, behaviors, and material objects that together form our way of life. Looking at society, the basics, we see that, quote, when studying culture, sociologists often distinguish between thoughts and things. Non-material culture includes intangible human creations ranging from altruism to Zen. Material culture refers to tangible creations of a society, everything from armaments to zippers. The terms culture and society obviously go hand in hand, but their precise meanings differ. Culture is a shared way of life or social heritage. Society refers to people who interact in a defined territory and share culture. Neither society nor culture could exist without the other. End quote. As with most cultures of people all over the earth and at different times in the earth, culture has formed around the unplanned, spontaneous, seemingly random events of life that everyone forgets after the culture is born, but not the priests of the culture, not the teachers of the culture. These specific people within a culture are the culture keepers. They are the teachers that observe the culture itself and keep the culture together through tradition. These specific people are responsible for making the culture real and for keeping the culture going. They, we, establish and continue the earliest traditions of the culture. And it is they, we, that the community goes to for their history and for their cultural advice. I and the Temple of Hip Hop are that institution within hip hop. Culture is natural to humanity, and so is the office of culture keeper or teacher. These cultural offices are ancient and common to indigenous human groups, and it is here that hip-hop also derives its cultural existence. But like the ancient griots and djeles from all parts of Africa, and like the indigenous shaman healers and the medicine women found all over the earth in almost every indigenous community in the earth, hip-hop's culture keeper office has too often been treated in the same way as these indigenous offices of old were treated by colonists, like criminals. Long before the existence of rap music, rapping existed. Long before the formation of modern breaking, many of the dance moves found in breaking already existed for hundreds of years in various parts of the world and in the United States. Long before the graffiti art that we know of today, graffiti art, rock art, cave art, and body art already existed for thousands of years. It is only now in this time that we are appearing in this form as hip-hop. But what were we naturally doing? Hip-hop's core elements, its core attitude and character, these are ancient and global. This is what we got to remember. You see, as culture, hip-hop is a global way to be. And it's ancient. Our way, our collective character as hip-hop is cosmopolitan and shared by millions of people all over the earth. It has always been like this. We have always been here. You just have to know where to look and how to look. Hip-hop and its real ancestry requires an intelligence broader than what is being offered today in many colleges and other learning centers. It is here that we transcend race, class, gender, religious affiliation, national identity, and all of the other colonial-based epithets to arrive at a more expanded awareness of ourselves as hip-hop. It is here that we see how important the content of one's character is over whatever one's skin complexion is, or wherever one is from. As culture, we are timeless and spaceless, and we can see our real ancestors not just through geographical information or through race, but also through character and collective consciousness, as well as through a refinement of our own minds, tastes, manners, and outlook. Remember, our indigenous ancestors were not of the same mind, taste, manners, and outlook as those that invaded and robbed them. And remember, this is not about race or ethnicity or political party affiliation or how much money one has. This is about the content of one's character. This is our unifier. This is our trust. This is our community. Therefore, to see our real ancestors accurately, it is not biology alone that we need to be using as a tool to read the past. We also need to be looking at character, cultural character. Who did what we did in world history? Who shared and shares our collective interests in world history? This would be hip-hop. Every black or white or brown person did not share our same interests or character or outlook. As many have already learned the hard way, only character and interest define who your real family is. Real talk. In our previous lesson, I mentioned that I would get back to John Leland's quote from his book, Hip, the History, in our explanation of culture. Let's go over this one more time as a concluding point and get more in depth with what Mr. Leland was showing us. In his book, Hip, the History, John Leland writes, quote, Clarence Major, in his study, Juba to Jive, a dictionary of African American slang, traces the origins of hip to the Wolof verb hepi, to see, or hippie, to open one's eyes, and dates its usage in America to the 1700s. So, from the linguistic start, hip is a term of enlightenment, cultivated by slaves from the West African nations of Senegal and coastal Gambia, end quote. Now, this bit of information is culturally important to African Americans in particular because it is from the west coast of Africa, places like Senegal and coastal Gambia, among other places, that many of our African ancestors are said to have entered slave ships on their way to the Caribbean and to the Americas. We are told that over 90% of the people to leave Africa left from Africa's west coast, from the Atlantic coast of Badagry and Cotonou, also known as the Port of No Return, and Gorée Island in Senegal. Among these captured people, however, were artists, poets, and dancers of all sorts. These were the people that African criminals were also rounding up and selling into enslavement. Defenseless artists, poets, and dancers. Not just captive warriors. That's not the whole story. These ancient artists, poets, and dancers were the hip-hoppers of their time. And the same ways that you feel about life and about living today are the same ways in which your ancient artistic, poetic, and dancing ancestors felt about life and living yesterday. These were a passive, peace-loving people that were totally not prepared for war and invasion. Music, art, songwriting, singing, and dance, as well as the making of clothing, the making of musical instruments, cooking, pottery making, weaving, along with agriculture, architecture, astronomy, and book writing. These are the natural talents of our original ancestors. These were not a warrior people. These were not warriors. These are civilization builders, not civilization destroyers. As most scholars already know, every organic culture begins with art, dance, and music, not hunting and fighting and stealing. The repeated activities of a community's art, dance, and music, its atom, forms that community's culture. And it was these civilization builders in Africa that were betrayed and sold into foreign enslavement by those other Africans jealous of their achievements. You don't just build a pyramid as an example and not have someone in your own community jealous because of what you did. This is how we were even able to be captured. We were not the fight back types. We were the agriculturalists, the astronomers, the architects, the dancers, the weavers, the poets, the painters, and the priests. Again, we were not the warriors, the kidnappers, the sellouts, and the thieves. We were their victims, or at least our ancestors were their victims. They, the warriors, the kidnappers, the sellouts, and the thieves, had no important skills useful to anyone in our community. And so they jealously destroyed the community and terrorized the agriculturalists, the astronomers, the architects, the dancers, the weavers, the poets, the painters, the cooks, the healers, and the priests that did not agree with them and their criminal ways. Those of us in ancient times that spoke up for justice and pointed out the crimes of these African criminals were met with retaliation and eventually sold into foreign submission and enslavement simply because they, or we, undermined the criminal agendas of these certain African criminals. The jealous desire to be Negus, or Negus Nagas, King of Kings, or Candace, Kendake, Queen Mother, or to just be admired and praised by the people of one's own community. Jealousy led these African criminals to assist in the overthrow of their own people with the assistance of foreign powers. This is what really happened, and this is what is really still going on today. The infighting, the backstabbing, the slandering of each other's names and reputation, the unforgiveness, the greed, the envy, the hate, the intolerance toward one another, all of these led and still lead to the weaknesses of our communities and the subsequent invasion and robbery of our lands and resources by foreign powers. Remember, when speaking culturally, every generation bears the responsibility of doing better than its predecessor. Not compete against, judge, or disrespect one's predecessor, but take the best parts of our foreparents, the best parts of our foreparents' character, and progress upon that, build upon that, leaving the errors and immaturities of the past in a box called learned lessons. This we must do for ourselves and for our children and for our ancestors. This is why the word hip and the word hop in hip hop are so important to seriously study, and why hip hop in this way is important to know. Hip hop is a global state of mind, and this is evident by the world's acceptance of it and by hip hop's original founders and many of its cultural pioneers coming from the Caribbean outside of America. Even though hip hop appears as an American art form, and actually an American art form of Black and Hispanic origin in particular, the core characteristics of hip hop are actually Caribbean, even ancient African. Leaving from the west coast of Africa, arriving in the Caribbean, traveling even further onto the Americas and Britain, this is what is said to have happened to us, African Americans, for many of us to arrive in North America today. This same migration trail, however, Africa to the Caribbean to North America, is the same cultural migration trail that Cool DJ Herc and his family, Jamaicans, would take to get to the Bronx in the late 1960s. It was these types of immigrants, Caribbean immigrants, that would bring together and innovate all of the independent and random elements of hip hop they experienced in the Bronx and throughout New York. No, it would not be American-born black people exclusively that would establish hip hop. It would be a specific immigrant class of African Caribbean people, or what is called Afro-Caribbean people, settling in the Bronx amongst the African American and Puerto Rican communities at the time that would establish early hip hop. And keep in mind that every Jamaican or Puerto Rican or Haitian or American-born black person was not into hip hop. Only a certain kind of Jamaican or Puerto Rican or Haitian or American-born black person, even certain kinds of Italians, Greeks, and Germans would be attracted to hip hop. Everyone, however, was not hip hop or attracted to it. Just because you were black or Latino or associated with black people or Latino people didn't mean that you were hip hop. Hip hop has always been a specific people. Hip hop has always been specific to a certain kind of person. And this is important to point out. In the early days of hip hop's formation, you had to be attracted to this kind of artistic social movement. This movement, hip hop, had to define you. It had to define you, and regardless of race or ethnicity, it was these certain kinds of kids that would begin influencing everyone else to the magnificence of hip hop. But at hip hop's very beginning in the United States, it was young Jamaican kids like Cindy Campbell and Clive Campbell, Cool DJ Herc, that would literally get the party started. We know that after Jamaica established its independence in August of 1962, thousands of Jamaicans came to the United States looking for the education, the work, and the money needed to live comfortably back in Jamaica. But many of the children of these immigrants, these Jamaican immigrants, began to see things differently. Growing up in America gradually transformed many of these younger Caribbean immigrants into African Americans. And Cool DJ Herc was one such youngster. Cool DJ Herc, Africa Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash, Dougie Fresh, Lovebug Starsky, Chief Rocker Busy Bee, and many, many more, including KRS-One, all have direct or mixed Caribbean ancestry, particularly Jamaican. None of the families of hip-hop's original founders are organically or traditionally all-American or all-African-American. Again, we say that hip-hop is an American-born culture because it actually is. But we must never forget that the United States of America is a nation made up of immigrants. Yes, hip-hop is an American-born culture, born in the Bronx, New York. But culturally, in the 1970s, the Bronx was far more Puerto Rican and American black than it was Jamaican or Trinidadian or Haitian. However, it was the children of Caribbean families that grew up to become Cool DJ Herc, Africa Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash, and many others. Knowing that many of our direct ancestors parted Africa from the same regions that the word sound hip was used to mean being aware, and that the ascendants of these ancient hip-speaking Africans found themselves specifically in the Caribbean, South America, and North America, eventually reuniting culturally with one another from the Caribbean into the United States, settling in New York, in the Bronx, and then intuitively beginning to chant, hip hop, you don't stop. Hip hop, you don't quit. Without knowing that our direct ancestors used the same word, hip, to mean aware. It is clear that we are dealing with the transference of our ancient culture right now, right here, through the very word hip hop. Literally, the very name of our culture, hip hop, is the reunification of one of our original African cultures and civilizations. This is the truth. The core ways that we are the core ways of our ancestors, our hip hop ancestors, hip hopians. Our interests are their interests. And obviously, they saw a global culture of peace and prosperity through what we are now calling hip hop. As mentioned earlier, language is the key to the transference of culture. And as we could clearly see, our direct African ancestors are speaking to us through our intuitive cultural language, our spiritual language. Obviously, our culture is hip, aware, and it is this awareness that not only reunites us with our direct ancestors, but such an awareness also awakens us to the collective intent of our ancestors, which was peace, love, unity, and safely having fun. Now we can see. Now we know who and what we are. In world history, even in Earth's history, we are the aware people on the move, the hips hopping. And this group of highly creative and talented people are ancient to humanity and to Africa. Could this be who and what we always were? A self-aware people on the move? Could this be what we were in Africa? And could this also be what got us, our ancestors, sold into enslavement? Not that we were prisoners or captives of tribal war, but that our style of person was an irritant to those committing crimes in our community and other communities. Remember, it was the criminal class of our ancient societies that violated communal laws and principles and had no respect for anyone's ancestors. And it was these types of Africans that were willing to capture and sell defenseless men, women, and children, regardless of race or tribe or community. We must also remember that culture is character, and character is culture. The roles that you play today in a culture are most likely the roles your ancestors played in ancient times in ancient cultures. Think about that for a minute. If you want to see what happened to your culture in ancient times, look at what is happening to your culture today. If you want to see who caused the downfall of your ancient culture yesterday, look at who is responsible for the downfall of your modern culture today. Look at the character, the wants, the desires, the needs, and the motivations of certain people in our culture today. This will show you with astonishing accuracy what went on in ancient times. It's all a cycle. Cultural history does repeat itself. The question is, what role do you play in world history? This is just the beginning. This is only an introduction to hip hop. We would like to invite you into the Temple of Hip Hop so that you can further your studies. You can go to thetempleofhiphop.org and get more of these studies, or you could just roll up to wherever you find us at. We're global. You may see us in your town, in your city at some point. Come to one of the lectures so that you can ask questions about this particular study or any other questions regarding hip hop. I am KRS-One, master teacher of hip hop's arts, science, and history and culture. I thank you for learning today.